Bruce Shapiro, Director of the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma, www.dartcenter.org, here at Columbia School of Journalism, which, along with the Tao Center for Digital Journalism, is sponsoring today's symposium. Some very important housekeeping before we go into the next discussion. First of all, hashtag for this event is hashtag after Sandy Hook. Please make aggressive use of it. This program is being live streamed and archived, so try not to say things that would embarrass you or that you wouldn't want represented unto eternity. And it's being broadcast as well by C-SPAN. If you have a cell phone, out of courtesy to the hardworking videographers here and to the live stream audience, please turn that cell phone off or put it on silent. Also, when we get to questions in this session and other sessions, not only can we take questions from those of you in the room, but for our live stream audience, if you have questions, you can write them in through the software, and we'll read some of those questions out here. So let's bear that in mind as well. Okay, any other housekeeping? No? I think we're good. I'm going to now move down here, and we can move into the next discussion. Okay, I am privileged, fortunate, to be sitting next to Bill Lukart, who has been a reporter with the Hartford Courant for a very long time. Right. Connecticut Journal
Since 1994. I began working in 1978 for the Waterbury paper.
Yeah. And that would be in and of itself a good reason to be talking. Anyone who's covered Connecticut politics and Connecticut life that long is worth talking to. But we're also here because Bill is the stepfather of Lauren Rousseau, one of those brave teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School who lost her life in December. You've all seen the beautiful pictures of Lauren. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about this interesting question now about journalism and tragedy, and from the perspective of someone who is here with his reporter's notebook. Can I just tell you, he's got the technology of our trade.
Right. And my favorite word processor.
Yeah. But who also has now crossed the line into being the father of someone who died and a stepfather and the person in the middle of this story. Let's, if you don't mind, go back to December 14th. You got in the car going to Newtown as a reporter.
Yes. I got a call from the desk at the Courant. Terry and I and Lauren, we live in Danbury, which is the next town over from Newtown. So I was the closest person in distance, the Courant staffer, to the school. So I got a call saying there's been some incident at a school. Here's the address, Dickinson Road, Dickinson Way. No one said Sandy Hook School. I had no idea it was the school. So I drove out there to it. I was assigned to go there, and when I got there, it was shortly after 10. I think the murders occurred about 9:30, so there was, by that time, a large contingent of police and reporters there. It was a tumultuous scene. None of us who were out at the school had any idea what happened. When I got there, I realized this is where Lauren teaches. She's a substitute there. Someone said, there was a janitor that shot himself in the foot. That was one of the initial stories I heard when I first got there. So I thought, the poor girl. I hope it wasn't too traumatic to have this happen in her school. Within a half an hour or so, it was clear that that was not the story, and I called the Courant and then told them that it's a lot worse than originally thought. We didn't know what was happening, and I went back home, off for the day, and it turned out I was off for like 3 or 4 weeks until I went back to work. So I wasn't there the full day. I wasn't there when the news finally came out that she was among the victims. We did not get that news till 1 in the morning from the police. But initially I was there as a reporter, although when I realized that I would probably going to be more than just a reporter at the scene, but someone who had a family member and loved one involved in it, I should get out of here, so I did.
You have, in your career as a reporter, dealt with families who were grieving at one time or another.
Yes, often.
What was, who called you from the press first, and what was that first media call like?
The first call was from, actually, my best friend, Bob Miller, who works at the Danbury newspaper with Terry, Lauren's mom. Terry works as an editor at the News-Times. We've all been reporters and editors for 3 or 4 eons. So unlike most other families, we were more comfortable in the press calling us. So Bob came over to talk with Terry about the murder the day before of Lauren. Bob knew Lauren. Bob knows all of our 6 children. And I've been friends with Bob since high school, so he came over and talked with us, wrote a story. Once that got posted, that opened the floodgates, because as you'd all know, and I would do too, you'd say, oh, this person talked, this family talked. Maybe they'll talk to me about the thing. And so we began to get lots of calls from reporters who were in the Newtown area, but were from all over the world. And we didn't mind having them, but there were so many that we actually had a friend come to listen to the phone and write down a list of who had called. Not that we were adverse to talking to anyone, but there were just so many calls coming in because we were probably the first family to speak or to have something published.
You and your wife Terry are both journalists.
Yes.
She's with the Danbury News-Times. You're with the Current. Was there a point? I'm curious when the two of you sat down and said, "Well, from what we've learned, here is how we should handle this."
Well, she works as an editor. No, there wasn't a specific point. It's an ongoing conversation. Yeah. She's an editor. I work as a reporter. I'm also the stepfather, and I did not want to be a spokesperson for the family. And I love Lauren dearly, but she has a father who lives nearby, and I thought Gil should be the father figure who speaks for Lauren. Terry wanted to speak, and so I would always support her, but she would speak, and I support her, but I'm not really in the background. I'm in the background usually. This is unusual, but I'm here because of my dual role in this.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how Lauren became known. I mean, this is someone who hadn't been in the public eye before. Terry, you and Terry did speak in that first piece in the News-Times. Did you feel as if reporters did a good job of portraying her?
Well, I have to say that because we were in the middle of the story and not outside of it as reporters, that we didn't feel the need, nor did we have the desire to read every single thing that was written right off the start. I mean, the news for us was not what we all printed. The news for us was that she's gone, she's dead. Yeah. And nothing we would read would change that. So I can't say that we read every single thing that was written immediately. We're beginning to catch up now, reading about things. I think when Terry talked to Bob and talked a lot about Lauren, that's how Lauren first became known to members of the press as a person and not just a statistic, as one of the 6 teachers who was killed. And like I said, I haven't read everything that people wrote, but there's been nothing I've seen that was really jarringly inaccurate or surprising, other than a few of the postings online by some of the truthers that Lauren apparently had a fling with the shooter and or she was being stalked by him. It's crazy stuff. But for the most part, no, the things have been accurate.
Even in a world of crazy assertions, that's a particularly crazy
Yes,
set, I think.
yeah, that and the fact that I'm supposedly a leader in the Zionist world conspiracy to get rid of guns. I don't know where, that come from.
Let me take you back, actually, to your own work as a reporter. I know I can think of the times that I reported on bereaved families. Was there anything that now, in retrospect, that having as a family crossed over on to the other side of being the story, was there anything that you reassessed in your own work, in the way in which you think about these things?
No, I can blame my mother for this, but I've always been kind and compassionate. So I think kindness is what really resonates with families in crisis. So if you go up to them as a reporter and say, I'm Bill Lukart from this paper, say, I'm sorry for your loss, acknowledge why you're there. You also can acknowledge that the people they have no obligation to talk with you, but if they want to, just don't be super aggressive. I never was annoying. I mean, I might have been somewhat aggressive, but I was always mindful of people's loss. And I think that's the important thing. We have a job to do, which is to talk to people in good times or bad. And there might be worse times than this, but I can't imagine what they might be. But it's our job to tell about these things and just be compassionate. And if someone says, I'd rather not talk with you, don't pester them. Give them a card if you want and say, if you want to talk with me, call me, and if it's all right if I call you in a day or two.
As this story has gone on and evolved, there was the Act One, there was the initial period in which information about Lauren's death and the deaths of the other 25 get out, and then there's the coverage of the funerals, and you're there as grieving families. And then in the days and weeks that follow, some of the families begin to get very engaged, really very quickly, with the issue of guns, and your family among them. I mean, Terry
Yes.
right away in the News Times was talking about this. How has that changed? How did you as a family decide to engage with this very controversial set of political issues, which is not the same thing as simply how to portray a
Right.
child who's been lost?
I think for us, for Terry and for Lauren's father, Gil, and his wife, Joyce, and for all of us, it's just a way to do something in the wake of this slaughter of Lauren that might help other families down the road either avoid being in the same miserable situation or trying to make some sense of what happened to us by addressing what we think is a problem that should be at least talked about. We're under no illusion that there's a magic wand that could be waved that said, poof, gun issues will go away with this one piece of legislation. But I think there's enough issues raised by what happened in Newtown. It's a very severe symptom, but it's a symptom of a greater issue to tackle, so we felt obligated to be part of that. I'm very mindful as my job as a reporter, so I don't speak publicly, and I keep those two things sealed, my private life and my job life. I don't talk to people about what happened to us. If they acknowledge it, I'll say something, but I have a clear, bright line between things.
But you did make a decision as a family to kind of get engaged with Sandy Hook Promise, is that
Yes.
right? Or
Yes, we did. Initially, and still, it's a way that we can meet other families and just talk with them. The Sandy Hook Promise is there's a group of us that have gotten together, mostly victims, families, and relatives, and those affected by it, what happened, to try to see, well, what can we do to address some of the issues that this whole thing raises, whether it's gun violence control, mental health, improving mental health services, or anything. So yes, we didn't decide it was a good thing to get involved in. I mean, would that we didn't have the impetus to get involved. Just like when the truthers say, oh, it's a big hoax, there's this actors, I wish it were true, but, there is this horrible reality that we face every moment. So this seemed to be a way to do something that might be useful.
Bill, let me ask you actually a journalistic question. One of the changes that has come about in recent years with mass shootings and with Newtown in particular has been the sense among some, maybe not all, but many victim families that the name of the shooter shouldn't be used or spoken. And we actually heard Lieutenant Vance say he won't use the shooter's name. Now, this is a challenge for us in journalism because we tell stories. How do you feel about that as a step-parent, as a journalist, wherever? How do you come down on that one? And how do you think when news organizations are trying to be sensitive, how should we parse that?
Well, I think as far as name using, the only thing I would say is that don't print the names of the victims until the families were informed first. As far as anyone who's involved in the commission of the violence, I have no problem with anyone mentioning Adam Lance's name or talking about his mom, Nancy, or anyone else involved. I think we should talk about it. It shouldn't be a big secret. You may not want to write a story, obviously, that glorifies what happens. It's like the people in Norway probably wouldn't want a big story on how wonderful Anders Breivik was. But you've got to talk about, got to mention the names. It's not a secret.
And
It's like the brothers in Boston.
some of the families clearly feel a little differently than that.
Yes, we're somewhat different, I suppose, in that we have years of exposure in the business, so we understand. And I talk sometimes with some of the family members who are really worried about the court records coming out, like when the warrant applications were unsealed for the search warrants. They were terrified that they would include a stack of autopsy pictures. And I told them, I said, there would be, it's not going to happen because that's not the kind of thing that's in these. But they don't know. People don't know, and the parents were really worried that when these court records got unsealed a few weeks ago, it would be these horrible on-the-scene pictures of what was left of their children after they were butchered.
But I'm curious now, when you knew those records were going to come out, did you have any of your own trepidations separate from your identity as a reporter? There's what you know, but was...
No, I mean, I've covered court off and on for 15 years. I covered court, and I'd seen any number of things sealed and unsealed, court filings. So I just figured they would be what they were, which is just a list of here's where we want to go into this house, this car, here's what we're looking for, some information, but not a lot. So no, I didn't think there'll be anything there that would be too awful. I mean, what could be worse than the news that we got on the 14th?
One of the big controversies in media circles in the last few weeks has come, in fact, since you mentioned autopsy pictures, from Michael Moore's suggestion that the crime scene photos or autopsy pictures be released. He talked about the power of photographs of Emmett Till changing the politics of the country during the civil rights era. As a step-parent, or as a journalist, or as both, how do you think about that?
Well, I don't think they should be released without a cause or trigger, which would be, in this case, if there was a trial and they were introduced as evidence and they become public. I don't think they should be released. What's the point? And the hurt that it would cause to the families would be incalculable. Because this was a high-powered weapon with multiple shots to each victim. It took a long time, I'm assuming, for the police to figure out who was who, and it's not just because children don't carry identification, but it was just, I'm sure, horrific wounds.
Let's go back a little bit now and talk some more about encounters with the press over time, about Lauren.
Sure.
were there any encounters, and you can name names or not, I don't care, but were there anything that you found especially intrusive or troubling or aggravating? And was there anything that seemed to you especially helpful and supportive?
For us, nothing seemed over-the-top intrusive. People were very respectful. And I heard from the panelists before that that by and large was the case. Certainly was for us, and it wasn't that we're isolated, that we had lots of people knocking on the door, leaving cards, calling us. Terry, I think, gave 12 or 15 interviews over the first few weeks. Some of them to television in Denmark, French television, German, English, reporters from all around the world. But people were kind, understanding. They would, if we said we can't talk now, but come back in a day or two or give us a call, they would respect that. I don't know how other experience of other families were per se, but from what I saw, it was not awful. I mean, there weren't people trying to climb in a window or, doing anything awful like sifting through the trash. It was fine.
What would make you most inclined to talk to someone now, do you think?
Now, well, only because of the job that I have, I'm very careful about talking. I really don't want to talk to anyone about it because I don't want to be part of the story, because I want to have a little bit of a, divide between the two things. But theoretically, if someone came up to me and said, Bill, so, sorry for your loss, I'd like to write a story about whatever, depending on what their explanation is or the reason for writing it, I would be happy to talk with them, although I'm sure Terry would also talk too. I think it's just the reason for writing it. You don't want to have someone who's there to dip their handkerchief in the blood and wave it around in print. You want to have a story about something more substantial, maybe looking back or some other issue.
Yeah. Let me now swing it back around a little bit to politics again, because there has been a bit of a roller coaster in the last few weeks. Connecticut passed its gun bill, which was partly a gun bill, partly a mental health bill, actually. And then there was this big debate in the Senate that ended the way it ended. For you as a family, what's that like? You've made a decision to kind of cross into some advocacy on this issue as a family, separate from your professional life. As a survivor with a stepdaughter who's been killed, what has this debate, this escalating debate been like, reaching everyone from, Pat Lodra up to the President of the United States and media organizations up to 60 Minutes, who Terry was on, on the eve of the debate?
It's, but we've never not been mindful of such debates nationally. Being in the business, we have followed them. But now we have a dog in the fight, so to speak, so we follow it more. I don't go to talk to the governor or other people as, in the role as grieving stepdad. I just don't do that. Terry might go, or Gil and Joyce might go, or siblings and step-siblings might go. One thing, though, that all this has made me realize there's how many thousands and thousands of people in this country who have lost loved ones to violent acts. And no one's under illusion that any new bill that gets passed will mean there'll never be another one of these again. There will be. But if we could do something to maybe lessen access to a weapon of mass destruction, that causes so much damage to other families, then, keep working for it.
And we should say that Lauren's brother and stepsister are here with us today, and we're lucky to have you. And if there's anything you want to add to the conversation, give us the high sign, and we'll make that happen. I think I'd like to go now, actually, to questions from the audience. And again, to respect the hardworking videographers here, we'll try to take questions maybe first from this side of the room and then that side of the room, but also to invite anyone on live stream who's watching this to send in your questions, and we'll make it through those. Anyone on this side of the room have something you're interested in? Or anyone on either side of the room? This is a very, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lorena O'Neill. I'm a student here.
Hello.
I was wondering, going off of what you were saying about how newspapers shouldn't print the names of victims before informing the families, last week with the Boston Marathon bombings, there were a lot of photos published of people without their limbs, and some of the family members found out that way. How did you think that should have been handled?
That's a breaking news thing. I mean, maybe the people were not identified as, like, here's Bill Lukart with his hand blown off, but here's a picture of the scene. That's what we do. We go to a scene and try to document the history of it. You know, it's like the pictures that Matthew Brady and the crew took in the Civil War. You know, there's not the names of the soldiers lying in the Devil's Den at Antietam, but you know, there's those pictures and very powerful. So pictures, I think, are different than a story. I think a story that would say, oh, here's the name of the 170 people that were hurt in the bombing. You know, you'd much rather have heard that, not from here, but from the police or someone saying, oh, your mother was hurt, your brother was hurt, or whatever. The pictures I have no problem with. And they're grisly and they're awful, but I don't feel there's the same standard. You know, as far as like writing a name of someone and taking a picture that doesn't identify the person by name. I mean, you might know that it's your relative, but the rest of the world doesn't.
I suppose also it's what you said earlier, that the loss, the wound is the loss of your stepdaughter on December 14th. It's not the picture per se. Yes.
Thank you.
Why don't you stand up and again, let us know who you are, just for the sake of history.
My name is Jamie Bedrin. I'm here wearing many hats today because I am an adjunct here and I teach elsewhere, but I'm a mother and a journalist and involved in an organization called Moms Demand Action. But my question is a difficult one, but it's something that's been bothering me. I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss, and I have colleagues from my class here at Columbia who have worked with you and said what a wonderful person you are. I think you said before that you didn't really find out about Lauren's death till like 1 a.m. Did you say that?
Right.
And recently I was at a meeting with a man who lost his son in Virginia Tech, and he had a very similar experience. And I understand what we just learned, how difficult it is to identify children, but why do you think, or do we know why in your case it took so long with Lauren? Is it just that there were so many people?
I think it's because of the numbers of dead and wounded, and I don't think she had any identification with her. She probably had a purse somewhere in the room. Yeah, the police wanted to be 100% sure because she was a substitute and might not always be in every classroom every day. They wanted to make sure they went to the right family and said, Bruce, we're sorry it was your daughter, rather than, it's not your daughter, it's his daughter. And I think because the wounds were so disfiguring, it was hard to figure out who somebody was. Plus, initially, I believe that for some reason, they had Lauren's birth date wrong on their master sheet for the police. I don't know if it was a typo or not, but it made her older than what she actually was. So they're saying, well, we have records that this person is in their 40s or 50s when Lauren was just 30. So who is this person?
I had forgotten that she was right, in fact.
Right. And so they finally went to Gil's house and asked for a picture of her, a recent picture of her, so they could use that to try to firmly identify, well, this is who we have. But that took a long time. So I think that's why we didn't hear until 1 o'clock, and we heard from Gil, who called us after the state police went to his house and told him, we're sorry, but your daughter was among the deceased. So he called us, and that's how we found out. It was a long day. We didn't know, and you'd sort of hope against hope that, you know, in fact, she was wounded in a hospital. But the longer it went on, the more you realize it's not going to be good news, but we didn't know for sure until late.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Yes.
Bill, hi. Mike Patrick from the Republican American, your
Hello, Mike.
alma mater here in Waterbury, Connecticut. becoming part of the story in the tragic, very unfortunate way that you did, moving forward now yourself as a journalist, does that bring a greater perspective to you as you approach a story? Should you have to cover a tragedy again? How will you approach the victims? How will you approach the police? Has that changed at all?
I cover several small towns now in the center of Connecticut, and most of the stories I've covered since this have had nothing to do with this type of violence. I couldn't help but be more mindful of the misery that a family might be going through, but it's not like we're unfeeling in this business. So you don't need this to remind you that here's a family in crisis. I'm going to knock on their door. Don't be cruel. Be kind. No, I don't think it'll change things other than make me even more mindful and less eager to go talk to them. But of course, we have to.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Kate Oberdorfer. I'm a student here also. I'm really sorry.
Oh,
I
thanks.
was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the emotional balance between being the reporter and trying to cover certain things, and then also being part of the story and dealing with your own grief, and just the balance between reporter and family member.
Well, Terry and I took just about a month off, so we had a month to process it. Although when it first happened, it's like when you hit your hand with a hammer, you realize you just bash your finger, and for a couple of seconds it doesn't hurt, you're just stunned. Well, we were in that stunned period for like a couple of weeks, at least I was. And I can remember all the days from the 14th on, but it was all like a big blur. I remember, it's not like I don't remember things, but I can't tell you what happened on what day. So when I've gone back to work, I've begun to process that. I'm quiet at times, but I can listen to news on the radio without getting overwhelmed by sadness. It's part of our new normal to think of, she was killed, she's murdered. I don't have any problem doing my job so far. That might change, who knows, as we go through the trauma.
Are there stories you wouldn't do you think?
No, I don't think so. Of course, I'll find out when I get assigned, hey, Bill, could you go to this murder scene? But people I work with are very compassionate and very protective. Matt Kaufman's worked on stories about Sandy Hook and others, and folks have come down to talk with me, but by and large, they haven't talked to Terry and I about Sandy Hook. They do their job without talking to us. And when they do, the people are so solicitous and so kind. I'm not asked to be part of any of the coverage. People just say, we have someone in the newsroom who is affected. We're going to write about stuff, but don't bother Bill. So
I'm wondering if there are any questions from the live stream that have come in? Okay. Another question in the room, then.
in the back.
Yeah, in the back, there you go.
Hi, I'm Liz Bowie. I'm a Spencer Fellow here and a reporter for the Baltimore Sun. This may sound a little insensitive, but I was just wondering, I was curious after the initial press reports in the first day or two, there was almost no attention paid to the shooter's mother's death as compared with the deaths of others. And I wondered if that had occurred to you and if you think that was a reasonable way for the media to handle that.
Well, I would say if I was a reporter in this and not somebody who was in the middle of the bad end of it, I would be thinking, well, let's find out about his home life. Let's find out a little bit about things. And I guess it probably just took a long time to get anyone to talk because Adam and his mom were the only people that lived in their house, and they're both dead. And he was a reclusive kid, and I think it was very difficult to find out about Nancy. I know it took a while for news reports to come out a little bit about their family. I thought about that. I've also thought, how sad for her. We feel bad for her and then the brother who's still alive and then her ex-husband, the father of Adam. But no, I didn't think there was any fault on the media's part or anyone's part for not writing about it. It just might take a while. Did I answer your question?
Let me maybe stretch that a little bit. As Lauren's stepfather, do you have personal curiosity about the perpetrator, about Adam, or do you leave it there?
I'm curious, but it's, the state police have told all of the families of the victims that, whenever you want to talk to the task force that's putting together the final report, call us up, we'll schedule a time, you can come and ask any question you want, we'll tell you as much as we can within reason, just so you're aware of what's happening. Some families have gone and talked, and it's a continual process, you can go more than once. We haven't yet, I think, because it's too soon, you don't want to go and hear stuff, but yes, we're both curious, and at some point we probably will go, but we haven't yet.
Other questions in the room? Yes. And again, if you could identify yourself for purposes of video.
Mary Fetchett, Voices of September 11th. My son Brad died on 9/11, and one of the big projects that we're working on now is building best practices based on some of these other mass casualties and terrorist attacks. And one of the things that we found in Virginia Tech, there was a lot of confusion around identification because the bodies were actually brought to multiple hospitals. And we were just in Tucson last week, and there was a whole process in identifying both the injured and the people that died, again, at multiple hospitals. So I'm just wondering, in the case of Newtown, were the bodies of both the injured and the deceased brought to more than one hospital? And could that have led then to a longer process in notifying the families?
I can't answer that because I don't know. I assume that all the deceased were probably pronounced dead at the scene, and their bodies probably brought to the medical examiner for the state. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question.
Let me ask you one other thing, kind of, not so much in a single best thing, single worst thing, but in the aggregate, what do you think that we as a profession could do differently or better before, during, or after the next Newtown? What should we be doing in advance of a story like this better, whether it's about guns or communities or whatever it is? Is there anything in the course of the kind of breaking story that we've learned, and now in this after phase?
I think in advance, or for the next Newtown or whatever, I mean, we don't know what's coming. There could be something awful outside in a half an hour or nothing for 20 years. You can't really prepare for it, other than have some kind of game plan for some big coverage of big events at your news organization. During the Newtown thing, what was learned, I would just say, just respect the victims and those who are trying to sort out the information. I'm not saying be passive in your job, but just be respectful and be kind. What's the takeaway from all this? I don't know. I mean, for some of us, it's like, well, let's see what issues are raised by this one particular incident and others, and let's see what we can do to address them in the system to see what might work, whether it's gun control, better treatment for those who are mentally ill. We don't really know, what will work in the future, but just work towards what you believe in.
Yeah. Ariel? Excellent.
Okay, coming from Trina McLellan on live stream. Bill, did your newspapers support you and Terry when they found out about Lauren's fate? Do they have formal programs?
Yes, there are, Terry works for the News Times, which is a Hearst paper. I work for the Current, a Tribune paper. Very, very compassionate. They're wonderful to us and continue to be. Terry has recently found it hard to work full-time, and so she's working part-time, and that's not an issue. People have been very, very kind.
Okay. Let me ask you one other thing, and then we can take a break right on time. Why don't you leave us with actually talking about Lauren? Now, at this distance, what should we, leaving here, who did not know her, except what we've seen in news stories, know about her? How should we be thinking about this person who's not here?
She really loved teaching and had a hard time finding full-time work, so she worked hard and had several part-time jobs. This was one of them. She hoped it would become a full-time. She loved teaching the kids, because I worked nights as a reporter. I'd often get, text messages from her, and sometimes it'd be excited messages about teaching. Others it would be, Bill, we need orange juice, we need milk, at the house. She lived with us. There was a girl she was morbidly afraid of spiders and of bats. I occasionally get messages when I'm at work 60 miles from home. There's a bat in the house, can you please fix it? She has two cousins who are in the military. They've been in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. They came back sound. We sent Lauren off to first grade. She doesn't come back.
Well, and that finally is the substance of this event, and that's probably where we should leave it. Bill, thank you. This was a
Thanks.
great thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks.
We will take a 15-minute break, and when we come back, social media and on all of the issues that raised and raises. Thanks.
There's Terry's contact information in the back.
Excellent. Bill.
Hope I didn't sound too dumb.
No, I didn't sound too much of a jerk.
No.
This up here for now. So listen, come together if you want.
I will. I think we are clear.
Thank you. Yes, no.